Story 1. The Whispering Walls. When MIA and her husband first bought the old Victorian on Elm Street, they thought they'd found their dream home. High ceilings, original woodwork, that kind of romantic, historical charm you just can't build anymore. But the first night they spent there, something felt off. It started small, just a faint murmuring sound coming from the walls late at night. At first, they chalked it up to old pipes, maybe even the house settling. That's what everyone says, right? But over time, the whispers grew louder. MIA would be reading in bed, and she'd hear what sounded like voices arguing, muffled, just behind the plaster. Sometimes, it wasn't arguing at all, it was crying. One night, unable to sleep, she pressed her ear against the wall. What she heard chilled her to the bone. It was a voice, clear as day, whispering, "Help me." Pause for effect. Terrified, MIA called in a contractor, thinking maybe there was something structurally wrong inside the walls, maybe animals had gotten in, or worse. But when they cut open the drywall in the master bedroom, they didn't find rats or birds. Instead, they found something much stranger. Between the beams and insulation were dozens of crumbling, yellowed letters stuffed into the walls. Each one handwritten, stained with age. And every single letter was a desperate plea for help. Some spoke of being trapped. Some begged for forgiveness. Others simply repeated the same phrase over and over again, "They won't let me leave." The letters dated back nearly a century. After that discovery, the whispers didn't stop. In fact, they got worse, almost as if something had been unleashed. MIA and her husband lasted 2 more weeks in that house. They moved out, leaving the letters and the whispers behind. The house still stands today, empty and silent, at least during the day. At night, if you pass by on the street, some say you can still hear faint voices crying out from behind the crumbling walls. Closing music fades in, soft, eerie piano, a narrator, whispering, "Would you stay in a house that talks back?" Story 2. The locked room. When Thomas bought the old farmhouse on the outskirts of town, he was told there was just one condition: he was never to open the door at the end of the second-floor hallway. The door was locked tight, no key in sight. At first, Thomas didn't think much of it. An old storage room maybe, or just a weird family superstition. But every night around 2:30 a.m., he would hear the knob rattle. Not just once or twice, violently, as if someone were trapped inside, desperately trying to get out. One night, unable to take it any longer, Thomas decided to break the door down. It took 3 hard kicks. When the door finally swung open, he expected dust, broken furniture, something normal. Instead, he found a completely empty room, no windows, no furniture. Just deep, gouged claw marks all over the wooden floor, the walls, even the ceiling. And in the center of the room, embedded into the floorboards, was a single, rusted iron shackle. Thomas moved out that same week. Locals say the house has changed hands 6 times since then. And every single owner tried to open that door. Story 3. The Phantom Dinner Party. At first, Daniel thought his new house was just old, creaky floors, strange drafts, nothing serious. But every Sunday night, around midnight, he would hear it, the sounds of a party downstairs. Laughter, the clinking of wine glasses, the low hum of a piano playing an unfamiliar tune. Daniel lived alone. One night, he crept downstairs, phone in hand, ready to record whatever he found. But when he opened the living room door, the noise stopped instantly. The room was cold and empty. Confused, he asked a neighbor about the strange happenings. The old man looked uneasy and said, "You're hearing the last party. They never made it out." He explained that, nearly 80 years ago, the house had hosted a grand celebration. The family, along with their guests, all perished in a fire that consumed the ballroom, the same room Daniel now used as a living room. To this day, every Sunday night, the house still throws its final, ghostly party. And Daniel? he decided he wouldn't stay for another invitation. Story 4. The Child in the Mirror. Jenna loved the charm of her 1930s craftsman home, the original fixtures, the old mirrors built into the walls. But almost immediately, she noticed something strange about the mirror in the upstairs hallway. Sometimes, when she passed it, she caught a glimpse of a little boy. Short, dark hair. Pale skin. Big, sad eyes. At first, she thought it was her imagination, a trick of the light. Until one evening, as she was brushing her hair in front of the mirror, the boy waved at her. Terrified, Jenna spun around. No one was there. When she looked back, the boy was gone, but tiny, foggy handprints remained on the glass. She tried to ignore it, covering the mirror with a sheet. But no matter what she did, the sheet would be pulled down by morning, and the boy would be there, closer than before. After weeks of sleepless nights, Jenna called in a local historian. They discovered that, in 1948, a young boy had gone missing inside the house. His body was never found. Some believe he never really left. Story 5. The Smiling Man. When Sam found a run-down farmhouse listed for an unbelievably low price, he thought he'd hit the jackpot. The first night, he woke to an odd feeling, as if someone was in the room with him. At the foot of his bed stood a man in an old-fashioned black suit, smiling. Frozen in place, Sam blinked, and the figure vanished. The next night, it happened again. This time, Sam mustered the courage to speak. "Who are you?" he whispered. The smiling man tilted his head and, in a voice like cracking ice, said, "Welcome home." After that, Sam saw him everywhere, reflected in windows, waiting at the end of dark hallways, standing just outside the door. Locals later told Sam the farmhouse had once belonged to a mortician who performed funerals in the very room Sam now slept in. And the smiling man? Some say he was the mortician himself, still greeting his guests. Sam moved out less than a month later. The house still sits abandoned, but neighbors swear that sometimes, at sunset, you can see a man smiling from the upstairs window. Story 6. The Crawling Shadows. When a group of college friends rented a house in New Orleans for the summer, they thought they were in for the time of their lives. But from the very first night, they noticed it, shadows that moved along the walls, fast, low to the ground, like rats. Only when the lights were on, nothing was there. At first, they laughed it off. Until one night, Kara woke up to find dozens of the crawling shadows gathering at the foot of her bed, shapes that didn't belong to anything human. Panicking, they reached out to the landlord. He admitted the truth: the house was built on a forgotten cemetery, one that hadn't been properly relocated when the land was sold. Those shadows? They weren't rodents. They were remnants, broken, restless spirits with nowhere to go. The friends packed up and left before the lease was over. They never even went back for their security deposit. Story 7. The music box. Elena's grandmother had left her a small, antique music box when she passed away. Beautiful, delicate, but broken, or so Elena thought. For weeks, the music box sat silent on her shelf. Until one night at 3:03 a.m., Elena woke to the soft, haunting melody of the box playing by itself. She told herself it was a fluke. Old mechanisms, maybe a temperature change. But it happened again. And again. No matter where she placed it, sealed in a box, buried under clothes, even thrown in the trash, every night at exactly 3:03 a.m., the song would start. Desperate, Elena smashed it with a hammer and threw the pieces into a nearby lake. For 3 nights, the music stopped. But on the 4th night, at 3:03 a.m., Elena woke to find the music playing softly again. And the broken music box, wet and rusted, sitting on her nightstand. Story 8. The burning smell. When the Johnson family moved into the big, sprawling house on Crestview Lane, they didn't expect anything unusual. It was an old house, sure, but it had character, the kind you can't find in new builds. The first storm hit 2 weeks after they moved in. Thunder rolled over the hills, rain slammed against the windows. And then the smell came. It wasn't just dampness or mold. It was something harsher. Something wrong. Burning flesh. Thick and acrid, the smell seemed to pour down from the ceiling, seeping into every corner of the living room. Mr. Johnson rushed to check the outlets, the fireplace, even the kitchen, but there was no fire, no smoke. Only that horrid, lingering stench. After the storm passed, the smell faded. The family laughed it off, blaming old wires or maybe something trapped in the walls. But it happened again. And again. Every time it rained, the smell returned stronger, more suffocating. As if the house itself were remembering something. One night, after a particularly violent storm, Mrs. Johnson noticed something new, black, greasy smears on the ceiling, almost like soot, but they dripped, slow and sticky, forming grotesque shapes. When they finally called a contractor, he pulled them aside after the inspection, pale and trembling. There had been a fire in the house decades ago, a fire no one had told them about. A family had been trapped inside, unable to escape the second floor. Their bodies were never recovered. The fire was so intense that the structure had collapsed before the flames could be fully extinguished. But here's the thing, the living room ceiling? It was built directly under where the bedrooms used to be. The smell wasn't just rot or mildew. It was something far worse. It was memory, burned into the very bones of the house. The Johnsons moved out within the month. They didn't even try to sell the house, they just left. Today, the house still stands abandoned. Locals say when a storm rolls in, you can smell it if you get too close. A sickly, burning stench that no amount of rain can wash away. Story 9, the red-eyed visitor. When Marcus bought the little house at the edge of the woods, he thought he was getting a fresh start. After a rough divorce and a move across the country, the quiet, isolated home felt like a blessing. No neighbors, no traffic, no noise. Just him and the trees. The first few nights were peaceful. He spent his evenings on the porch, sipping coffee, listening to the sounds of the forest. The chirp of crickets, the occasional rustle of deer. But then he started noticing something else. It began with a feeling, that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, the certain knowledge that you're being watched. Marcus would look up from his book or glance out the window, expecting to see someone standing there. Of course, no one was ever there. Just the trees, swaying gently in the breeze. Until the third week. It was just after midnight, during a heavy fog. Marcus was sitting in the living room, lights dimmed, watching an old movie, when something caught his eye at the window. Two glowing red eyes, staring directly at him. He froze. The eyes weren't animal-like, no glint, no movement. They were perfectly still. Round. Human-sized. And they burned. For several minutes, Marcus couldn't move. He just sat there, locked in a silent staring contest with whatever was outside. When he finally found the courage to get up, he lunged for the porch light switch and flicked it on. Instantly, the eyes vanished. He rushed outside, heart pounding, searching the yard with a flashlight. Nothing. No footprints in the soft earth. No broken branches. No sign of anything at all. After that night, the red eyes became a regular visitor. Sometimes they'd appear in different windows. Sometimes he'd glimpse them peering around the trunk of a tree. Once, he even woke to find them hovering just outside his second-story bedroom window. 20 feet off the ground. Marcus stopped sleeping. He boarded up the windows. He installed motion sensor lights and security cameras. None of it helped. The cameras never captured anything, just static and glitches whenever the eyes appeared. And the lights? They would flicker and die, leaving him in complete darkness. Finally, one night, Marcus decided to confront it. He sat on the porch, shotgun in hand, waiting. Sure enough, just past 1 a.m., the eyes emerged from the tree line. Only this time, they moved. Slowly, deliberately, they drifted forward, like they were gliding, not walking. As they got closer, Marcus could make out something horrifying, the faint outline of a figure. Lanky. Almost skeletal. The red eyes burned against the inky blackness of its face. It stopped at the edge of the yard, just beyond the circle of porch light. And then it spoke. A low, guttural whisper that somehow carried across the still night air, "Let me in." Marcus didn't wait to hear anything else. He ran inside, slammed the door, and called the police. When the officers arrived, they found no one. But they did find something else. Scratched into the wood of the front door, deep and fresh, were 3 words, "You already did." Marcus packed up and left the very next day. The house still sits empty, slowly rotting under the weight of the woods around it. And at night, some people say if you drive past the old place and look closely at the upstairs window, you'll see a pair of red eyes staring back. Story 10. The hallway that stretched. Laura had always dreamed of living alone. When she found the cozy little house just outside of town, it felt perfect, quiet, clean, and, most importantly, affordable. The house had only one odd feature, the hallway. It was longer than it should have been for a house that size. At first, Laura thought it was just an architectural quirk. But the first night she moved in, she noticed something strange. No matter how many steps she took, the hallway never seemed to end at her bedroom door the way she expected. It felt farther away. As if, with each step forward, the hallway quietly stretched out, keeping her trapped in a slow, endless walk. Laura laughed it off, blaming exhaustion from the move. Until the next night. The hallway was even longer, noticeably longer, and colder, too. The air grew heavy, and the light bulbs in the ceiling flickered, dimming one by one behind her. Panicked, she sprinted toward her bedroom door. It took far longer than it should have. Her breath came out in frosty puffs even though it was the middle of summer. When she finally reached her bedroom, slamming the door behind her, Laura pressed her ear to the wood. There, in the dark hallway she had just fled, she heard it, footsteps. Not hers. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer. The next morning, the hallway looked normal again. Short. Harmless. But every night, once the sun dipped behind the hills, it changed. The hallway grew longer and darker. The footsteps came closer and closer. One night, desperate, Laura tried something. She taped a ruler to the wall at the start of the hallway and measured the distance to her bedroom. It should have been 12 feet. That night, it measured 38 feet. And when she turned back to the ruler, it was gone. Only a long, dark tunnel stretched out behind her. Laura never made it to her bedroom that night. Neighbors found her the next morning, collapsed unconscious in the entryway, muttering over and over, "Still walking, still walking." She never went back inside. To this day, the house sits abandoned. Real estate agents don't bother showing it anymore. Because sometimes, if you look through the cracked front window at night, you'll see a dim hallway stretching on forever, and something lost, walking. Story 11. The Room of Weeping. They called it a hidden gem, a remote cabin deep in the woods, perfect for weekend getaways. Alex and his friends booked it without a second thought. The first day was perfect. Hiking, fishing, campfires. The isolation was peaceful, calming even. It was that first night that things began to shift. As they gathered around the fireplace, a strange sound drifted down from upstairs, soft, rhythmic weeping. It was so faint at first that they barely noticed. But as the night wore on, the sobbing grew louder. And it was coming from the locked room at the end of the hall. There was no key, no way to open the door. They pounded on it, called out, even tried to shoulder it open. The crying never stopped. If anything, it grew more desperate, heart-wrenching, like someone mourning something unimaginable. Thinking it must be a hidden speaker, a prank maybe, they tried to laugh it off. But that night, Alex woke around 3 a.m. to the sound of the door handle rattling. Soft at first, then violently shaking, as if someone were trying to claw their way out. He stared from his bed, frozen, listening as the weeping returned, not from the other side of the door anymore, but from inside his own room. Low, pitiful sobs. Terrified, he flicked on his bedside lamp and saw it. A figure hunched in the corner. Pale, soaked in shadows. Weeping so hard its shoulders shook. When he dared to whisper, "Who are you?" the figure lifted its face. Eyes hollow. Mouth open, not in a scream, but in a silent, endless cry. The light bulb flickered and burst. The room plunged into darkness. Alex doesn't remember how he got outside. He woke up at dawn, huddled against his car. They drove away and never looked back. Later, Alex learned the cabin had been owned by a family in the 1940s. One by one, each member died mysteriously, lost in the woods, drowned in the nearby creek. Only the youngest daughter remained, trapped and alone. Locals say she died in that upstairs room, locked inside, crying for someone to save her. Even now. Story 12, the portrait that followed Samantha hadn't been looking for antiques. In fact, she had only wandered into the dusty little thrift store to escape the rain. The place smelled of old wood, mildew, and something faintly sweet, like rotting flowers. Tucked into a forgotten corner of the shop, half covered by a moth-eaten sheet, she found it, a portrait. A woman, probably early 30s, sat stiffly against a muted brown background. Pale skin, dark dress, her hair pulled back tightly. But what caught Samantha's eye were the woman's eyes. They seemed alive. Wherever Samantha moved in the store, those painted eyes seemed to follow. Piercing, watchful, full of a strange sorrow, or was it anger? She didn't know why she bought it. Maybe it was the cheap price. Maybe it was the strange pull she felt, standing there, soaked by rain, staring into that woman's endless gaze. Samantha took the painting home and hung it in her living room. That night, she noticed it again. The sensation of being watched. Even when she wasn't looking directly at it, she could feel those eyes boring into her. A few days later, friends who visited started to comment. "That painting, it's creepy. I swear she's looking right at me. I feel like she's following me with her eyes. You should get rid of that thing." Samantha laughed it off. Mostly. But then, strange things began happening. At night, when the house was silent, she would hear soft thumps, like someone walking barefoot across the hardwood floors. Lights flickered. Objects, small ones at first, then larger, began moving on their own. She'd find books she hadn't touched piled in the middle of the floor. Chairs nudged slightly out of place. Always facing the portrait. And the woman's expression? It began to change. Slowly. Subtly. The tight-lipped neutrality of her mouth shifted, first to a small frown, then, over the weeks, to something much darker. Something angry. The eyes, once merely watchful, now seemed accusing. One night, Samantha woke to a loud crash. She rushed into the living room to find the painting lying face down on the floor. Relieved, she decided it was time to get rid of it. She wrapped it in an old blanket, shoved it into the back of her car, and drove it to the nearest donation center. Good riddance, she thought. That night, she slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. But when she went downstairs the next morning, there it was. The portrait. Leaning casually against the living room wall, as if it had never left. The woman's face was different now. The mouth twisted into a smirk. The eyes gleamed, triumphant. Terrified, Samantha tried everything, burning it, burying it, even leaving it at the edge of the woods miles from her house. No matter what she did, the portrait always returned. Neighbors claim they've seen a woman fitting the description of the painting's subject, pale, dark-dressed, peering out from Samantha's windows at night. Samantha eventually moved far away, abandoning her house entirely. But the portrait? It still hangs inside, waiting for someone new to bring it home.